similar to the single leg stuff we talked about. And we'll talk about like regressions from it, but basic squat will typically be a box there and a counterbalance. Okay, and counterbalance, because a lot of people can't, two things this does. They don't know how to, like they can't shift their butt back. Okay, so if they have this, it helps them shift their butt like they're sitting in a seat. So a lot of times I'm gonna over exaggerate it, but they'll go like this if they don't have a counterbalance. And then also, you'll see this if they don't have a counterbalance. I'm over exaggerating, but you're gonna see, if you stood in front of me, you won't see this logo. So you're gonna see it drop, right? So counterbalance, and tell me if any of it's too basic, all right? Or if you need me to like go more in depth with it, but counterbalance is gonna help keep that logo up taller, okay? So that's what this helps with. And then box usually is almost as basic as it gets, because one, it teaches the same thing. It teaches, if that box isn't there, some people go here and they don't know how to sit back, okay? And then also it's just a depth gauge. So to make it, let's say somebody can't get that low. Make it easier, I guess we'd grab one of the PVC, or not PVC, plyo boxes, or we would just raise it up. Very similar to like, progressions are all very similar. So very similar to what I did with the single leg stuff just a second ago, okay? That's pretty as basic as it gets. Or let's say you have someone older, probably wouldn't even use this. Maybe, it just depends. Depends a little bit, but you could or couldn't use it. And then you would just do a sit to stand. Let's say they're older. Just doing this control is really tough. A sit to stand would be a great option. But what you're gonna see a lot is this. Drop, that's one big one you'll see. Or you're gonna see rock back, up. So ways to get rid of that, a lot of different ways you can teach it. You can show it, like as you're sitting down, you're doing this, okay? Doesn't work, let's say it doesn't work. I'll just sometimes go to like physical cueing. So do a sit back for me. Like let's say you're rocking back.
So rock back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, make it look ugly. I'll just like stop them.
Oh, okay.
Like I'll like physically like stop them, or I break it down. Now don't stand up on the next one for me. I'll get them in position, and then I say stand up. Don't rock back into my hands, or don't rock forward. So that's another way you can break things down, and it's gonna depend on the person, right? But very, very, very basic from sit to stand is gonna be basically momentum. You're gonna see some knee caving a little bit on some people. If they can't get up without a ton of momentum, I won't really focus on it for me yet. I'm just gonna keep focusing on the rock. Once I can get rid of the rock, then I'll probably start working on, might see a lot of this. I'm gonna over exaggerate it, but.
Yeah.
And it usually only happens on like the way up, in my experience. I'm not saying it doesn't happen on the way down for some people, but
They put their knees in and they lean forward too far?
Yeah, or they don't have the strength, so they find it somewhere else. So they're not using their butt, so their knees might kick in. I think we see somebody today later that struggles with this. I'll just point it out today if you remind me. But the first thing on like a sit to stand I would coach, in my opinion, would be like momentum first, like getting rid of this. Once I can kind of get rid of the rock and it's a little bit more stand up tall, control, sit down, maybe a little bit of a rock's okay, and then back up. Then I'll start focusing other areas. Because I know that if I'm trying to coach knees out, or knees just from not kicking in, I know they're probably gonna even struggle to get up. If they're needing a ton of momentum to get up, then I'll just focus on momentum. Or an easy way to do it, if we can bump the box up and make it taller. That's really, like, sometimes exercises are just too hard, and the easiest way to do it, let's just make it easier. Same thing as with the single leg squat. If it's way too hard and you feel like a million things are going wrong, we'll just adjust the box, and sometimes less coaching can be better. Because then it's just the wrong exercise. So basic sit to stand, like I said, would be control, sit, a little bit of They might rock back a little bit, which is okay, and then just limit as much momentum as possible, and then up. Okay, does that make sense? And then,
Do you, even before this, do you have them use their back to try to get lower?
could, yeah.
Before.
Peace out, bye. Yeah, and it would depend, right? So it depends on, I think, kind of going back to what we were talking about with like holding on to rack, holding on to TRX, if you want to teach a sit to stand faster, or a squat, if you wanted to get faster to this, you want to make the exercise as close to that exercise as you can. But that doesn't mean, my shoe is sticky, that doesn't mean this also isn't a bad idea, right?
Sticky. It could have been from, my thing was dripping and I thought I got it all.
Oh, it's fine.
It was honey.
That's not a big deal. And you could totally do this. And that might be a really good idea for maybe somebody who's overweight. But if that's probably like a better, and what you'll notice here that they do, it's probably a better like warm up, right? Or working on some assistance.
It can help them like get lower too.
Totally, yeah, totally. It can help them lower. It might even help them feel what a squat depth should be, or feel what a squat should even look like. You could even use, right? You could use this, right? You could use the TRX, just the same exact thing. Cindy the other day was struggling with, she was having knee pain. So I'm like, we're gonna limit load on knee, so let's just get rid of her goblet squats that were lightweight, and let's just grab, I had one set where she did little assisted lunges, she limited range of motion, just because her knee was bugging her, no need to push it. And then when she had goblet squats, I just had her grab this and do her squats. And she was able to get lower. So that day, I took range of motion, less load on knee, for trying to keep her 15-pound goblet squat, and it just looked like this. And that's gonna depend on the person. But if you wanted to work towards a goblet squat, basic progression would be, if somebody can do a sit to stand, let's just say perfect world they can do it, you would go here, some sort of counterbalance, press out. You want them to be pretty vertical, okay? And then up. So I'm not even sitting down. I'm just lightly tapping, kissing my butt off the bench or the box, and then up. And the way you'd make it easier, just raise it up. Some people, you're gonna know as well, and this, sometimes you have to test this, but some people are gonna lack like ankle mobility. Okay, so their knee won't go very far over their toes, okay?
Yeah, I've seen that with
A lot of people will.
There was one of the like tall, like active men.
Oh, I believe it, yeah.
But I guess he hurt something.
Yes, if they injure their ankle, I'm gonna grab one over there. If they injure their ankle, they're more likely, as their body tries to protect it, so it stays stiff in that area. Someone might even just lack ankle mobility on one foot, which is a whole nother rabbit hole. but they might. Yes, yeah, exactly. So it's a little tough too. So heel elevation is the best. Doesn't mean you can't work towards not getting rid of that. But if they lack ankle mobility, sometimes you just have to try things. So if you see, this is where an assessment's gonna be helpful, because in an assessment you would typically, let's say this is a wall. Let's say the box is a wall. Let's just use the wall. I was just trying to do it for the camera. But let's say you would test ankle mobility by doing this. You'd be on one knee, keep heel down, and push knee as far forward as you can. Easy way that you can gauge it is good ankle mobility is a thumbs up away from the wall. I'm trying to see if they can even see me in that. But a good ankle mobility is a thumbs up away from the wall. Okay? If you are unsure, I would typically start people maybe a little closer, just so they feel like some sort of success, and they don't feel like they just failed something immediately. But you could start them closer, and you're gonna work towards good ankle mobility to be here. It's also a good way to test if somebody's lacking ankle mobility on one foot than the other. You can do these things during a session. Typically, I know, when they do the sessions here, or they do assessments here, they're gonna already test this, and they'll probably already know in programming, put heel elevation for this person. But this is how you would test it. It's very simple. Heel stays down, rock knee as far forward as you can, and then it should touch the wall, right? Some people are gonna be like this. And that's as far as they go. And then they'll lack ankle mobility, okay? Some people will have this and that. Because maybe they injured their ankle, right? You're probably just gonna give that person a heel elevation anyways for their squat. It's gonna be your best bet. Or you might not do bilateral, like do 2-leg squats. I would still do it probably. You just give them a heel elevation, but then you just want to watch their hips. Make sure something's going to try to compensate somewhere. If they have a really off ankle, let's say somebody tells you, let's just say somebody says, I tore my ACL. Okay, I bet if you walked behind that person and watched them squat, they're gonna favor they're gonna shift away from that leg. And so it's just something to keep in mind. It's not something you have to figure out or problem solve right then and there, but it's just something to keep in mind, like when I squat, and sometimes you'll get info. Like maybe I just worked with somebody brand new that I didn't assess, and I see like a lot of shifting, or I even see, I can tell only one heel's coming up when they squat, or I see something crazy. I'll be like, what's your injury history? Or I'll say, and if they don't tell me, or I say, did something happen to this leg? And then I might get more info out of them. But that's kind of getting a little nitty gritty, but
Yeah.
easy way to fix all that, right? Basic level would be adding heel elevation, okay? And it'll be here. And let's say somebody's also tough staying vertical. This might also help them a little bit too, okay? So they'll stay, usually, right, this is gonna help them a lot more than without it, okay? So that'd be very basic level. You can do this however you want. You can grab, well, I guess I'll just use this, but you can grab the metal plates and use heel elevations. Let's say you worked in a gym and they didn't have metal plates or whatever, they didn't have the small ones, you could use a plate.
Yeah, that's what years ago when I did.
Exactly, yeah, you can totally just use like a plate. You can use anything, get as creative as you want. If you're at home, people can use books, whatever you want. But typically, if you see somebody's heels coming up, first instinct should be, let me just try to cue their heels down and see if we can fix it first. Because you might not know if they lack it or not, and you're just going quick, right? Let's say you got an hour in the session, just go quick. We're just gonna cue heels down. A lot of ways you can do that. You can just tell them heels down. Let's say it doesn't work. You can then, I'll put your heels up. I'll just say squash my finger like a bug, and then see if they start like squashing down. You could put.
That could be dangerous.
It could be. These are the risks we're willing to take. You can do a lot of things. You can really do a lot. You could take a piece of paper. You can get as creative as you want. Let's say it still doesn't go down. You could then resort to testing it if you wanted to. Or you're pretty certain they lack ankle mobility, then you would just throw this, okay? Then over time, the way you'd work on getting ankle mobility back, somebody would work through several exercises to try to achieve that. Maybe that might be like a weighted ankle rock, where they put their chest over top of their knee and they do rocks to try to gain. And I'm just giving a random example, but there's several exercises to help with ankle mobility, and maybe that's what's going to help them. So you would typically throw that in the warm-up, or you could throw it with a superset of squats. A good example would have been, it's not the same example as this, but Debbie was struggling with foot pain. So that day, I'm just like, okay, here's a couple stretches we're gonna do in the beginning. Let's see how it feels. And then if it affected her squat later on, might adjust her squat depending on her foot pain. But I just threw a couple things in. She had foot.
How would you adjust the squat if her foot was hurting?
It would depend if there's a lot of shift. It probably wouldn't affect it too much depending on where at on her foot. That day it was just on the top, and that she just had it because she played way more tennis than she normally does. So people will typically get a lot of, and this happens in athletes a lot too, they typically something will go wrong because they've done way more than they're normally used to. That's why people pull their back when they move stuff or do something, because they haven't picked up heavy boxes for how long. Now you just randomly do a ton over and over and over again. So an athlete, baseball player for example, the biggest injury time for baseball guys is during spring training. Spring training is the very first thing. So a lot of the guys that don't prepare ahead of time a lot of them will get injured in spring training because they didn't expose their body to enough stress. Adults work the same way. So Debbie, who normally plays tennis, let's just say, I think she's like once or twice a week. That week she played way longer, way more, and she had pain the next day. So my eyes, it wasn't a big red flag because I'm like, oh, she just having a little like, she just tweaked it. She did way more than she normally does. Here's a couple things to do, and then we'll revisit it next week. And then if it gets way worse, now we probably refer out. But that's a totally different tangent, I guess, right? But basic squat, right? Counterbalance will help. Heel elevation if somebody needs it, to a box. After that, if they still need to heel elevation, we just get, well, you could do it a couple ways. You could keep a light dumbbell. What am I looking right here? This is where it gets a little, this is where me and Pat were kind of going, like talking about heavier and this and that, right? A 15 for somebody who's overweight, you might go back to this. You might go back to collapsing over. Just because if they don't, in a perfect world, if they didn't, they might feel like they're gonna fall backwards just because maybe they're overweight or legs, just depending on how tall their bodies are, like their limb lengths.
Would you just like help push?
It won't work because then they're gonna feel like they're gonna fall back.
Okay.
So in that scenario, let's say counterbalance looked good. Let's try a dumbbell, let's say. And let's say it goes back to what I wanted. In that scenario, depending on how strong they look, I might try a heavier dumbbell or a heavier counterbalance. So then instead of a 15-pound dumbbell, I might now try
What's the difference? Because I know
Yeah.
usually you guys do pushing out, but what if they're just holding it up the whole time?
then their shoulders are just gonna burn them.
Okay.
Like think if you held that out there for a long time.
Yeah.
The only reason you do the push out thing is just because they just don't get tired of holding it.
Could that be a progression? I mean, or is that just too much of a shoulder exercise?
I would view, yeah, exactly.
It's a lightweight.
I would even just view it more as, in this, we're just trying to achieve a good squat.
Yeah.
We don't even care about, like, we'll work their shoulders somewhere else. We'll work a overhead press, we'll work a row, we'll work whatever. So I wouldn't even, I would just, press is usually easiest. If somebody is holding it out, I would tell them to bring it, like I would tell them to press because otherwise the limiting factor of their squat is now gonna be holding that weight out for that long. But let's say you're like, okay, the counterbalance squat, let's say they just need, we'll just say they need heel elevation today. But let's say, okay, they can now do a perfect squat to a box like that, all right? And maybe they're struggling a little bit, but you're like, okay, they need ready to progress, and then you give them a 15, and it goes to this, okay?
Yeah.
You might first cue them. If you stood in front of me, so stand right there, and you're me, you would try something like, show me the logo on your shirt and make sure I see it the whole way, all right? I don't like chest up cue. I know a lot of strength and conditioning coaches don't. Some people use it, some don't. I don't like it. I know a lot of people don't because what happens when you cue chest up sometimes is people do, ready, so they'll go, they start arching like that. So a better cue usually is show me your logo.
But it's like if they don't have a logo, that's
I'll just say if you do. If you did, I'll say if they don't have one, I'll say like you had a logo. Or I'll see if they have a necklace on, or that's usually what I'll start with. But and that's where you can kind of get creative too.
Yeah.
Sometimes, or you can even, who was there the other day with me? John the other day. He can see his reflection in the little marker board thing. So I said, John, when you're doing that, he was doing like a staggered stance squat with the plate, and he had a problem last time with me of collapsing a little bit. I said, make sure you can see he had a logo as well. I said, make sure you see it that whole squat. Once you see it drop, you've gone too, like you've dropped your chest too low. On a deadlift, right? Like you should hinge on a deadlift, but on a squat, you're trying to get them to be roughly pretty vertical, okay? You might see a little bit of hinge, and that's okay. But let's say this doesn't work. You're gonna I would cue it first. Let's say you try so many cues, nothing works. you'd be surprised with taking a phone, recording it, and being like, what do you think? It does. I had it all the time. I've worked with lots. Kids are great examples because they want a young boy wants to ego lift. So they're gonna be grabbing as much weight as they can. I say nothing. I take the video and I say, what do you see? I don't tell them what's wrong, right, or nothing. I say, what do you see? And then I go from there. I typically will point out something they did good, and then I'll try to be like, do you see this? Like, and let's say it's a rounded back. Or let's say they're not, since we're on the topic of squatting, let's say they're collapsed over. Do you see how you're leaned over like this? And I'll try to get the understanding, yeah. A lot of times they just see it immediately, because like, if you see something bad, usually almost everybody knows it looks bad, right? But they might not always know how to fix it. But if they don't understand it, I'll show them, and then I compliment them again on something good. That's just how I coach at times, is the compliment sandwich. Yeah. But let's say you cue it. Let's say this video doesn't work. Let's just say we're trying stuff. Video doesn't work on the squats. Then the squat, like that weight, it's probably, like I said, they probably just need a counterbalance, like a heavier one. Sometimes you can see that if you've seen enough squats. Now we might know that dumbbell is just too light to help keep them vertical and sit back in a squat. So then, two things you can try. If you think their legs are strong enough, you can go and try and grab like a 25 or some heavier dumbbell. And then let's say it got worse, or well, let's say it could fix it, right? They could now, since they have a heavier weight in front of them, it helps them not feel like they're gonna fall back. So now let's say it doesn't look perfect. Depending on what you see, it could look way worse, or like I said, they can't come back up. Or they're gonna do two things, right? It just looks ugly, or they can't get back up because it's too heavy. Then your next step would try like a 15-pound plate, or you would try 7-pound dumbbell, like two sevens, and you can press them out. That's typically where I start. And then from there, if that's the type of person where it seems like they're struggling a lot, you just adjust tempos and just keep exposing the squatting, and over time they'll get strong enough to where we can now add a dumbbell back. Oh, okay. Does that make sense? Yeah. I wouldn't you don't need to keep giving them a 20, 25, unless they're a really big, strong dude. But then just let them, they just need more reps, they need more sets, they need maybe slower tempos, like a 1, 2, 3, and then that's how you progress them week by week. And then eventually they're gonna get to the point where now we could try the dumbbell again, and then we'll go from there. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions on that? So that's very basic, and I'm just telling you, if all of it went wrong.
Which I'm sure you'll see here.
It can, and it can everywhere, right? And sometimes, if it looks good and it's challenging enough, we don't need to fix it yet. Like we just like I said, we just give more reps, give more. You worked with Tim. Patrick brought up a good example. Tim's one where it's like he's had knee pain in the past, still kind of working through like a knee replacement. A couple, and then, so for him, his counterbalance one doesn't look perfect yet. His squat, he was the guy that was benching that one day, that told you he benched heavy. Remember that guy? So for him, his squat's not perfect right now, or it doesn't look like, it's like there's no need for us to give him a dumbbell quite yet, or there's no need for us to like keep pushing him at weight. Let's just keep running with what's working right now, and we'll just try to keep making sure every rep looks, because he's very tendency to, his reps will change. Like one rep looks good, towards the end he gets tired, and then they start not looking as good. So we're just gonna now try to just make quality reps, and that might be all we need to coach that day. Very low level, basic progression, but it can be tough, because if somebody can't do that, it's like, where do I go now? So that would be very low level squat. And then from there, you progress it to lots of things, right? We can progress to unilateral stuff. Sometimes unilateral stuff is easier too for some people, but then we'd progress to like a static lunge. You could progress to lunge, like any lunges, right? Unilateral is typically gonna be harder for some people, but some people actually, because of their hip mobility, it gets a little confusing, but some people, because of their hip mobility, this can be easier. can be, not always, but if somebody does, yes, exactly. It's because some people, double leg can be tough, but if they have the strength in their legs, this can sometimes, like I said, be easier. Even holding on to this and doing a split squat, or I call it a split squat, but
balance seems like the hardest thing for people when it comes to the unit balance.
oh yeah, it's so tough for them. I know, and that's something I progress balance too. Like a good way you can progress people's balance is, I'll be like, use 2 fingers instead of 1, or use instead of holding on, now use 2, or however they want to hold it. Use 2, use 1, and then you might even want to progress it by saying, half of the reps use 1, half of the reps don't use any. You know, like that's how you can make small little steps depending on the person.
Or towards the end, like you could on the last couple.
Yeah, and progression doesn't always have to look like, you know, more reps or more sets or more weight. It can look like better quality reps within that set. You know, and that, or just like little, like I said, little things like 1 less finger, you know, or load your leg. Like maybe they have a tendency to shift their weight back. Could just be like making sure they have quality reps where their front leg is loaded more. What would you think? What would be a next progression? Let's say they can goblet squat 35, and let's say we want to just change up their squat. What would be a next progression of squat you think you would do? Zercher?
Zercher.
Yeah, you could totally do it. Yeah, Zercher would be a good one.
Putting the weight out to the side, like a
Oh, like the, yeah. That would totally be another way. Yeah, that would totally be another way.
Or double holding them both out.
Yep, because then they would have to, they'd be holding more load.
Yeah.
One thing, what would be a problem that might happen if you go from here to here?
It's more challenging here because they might want to, they have to keep their shoulders back.
Uh-huh.
So they might just like go back to a core squat pattern, especially with their upper body.
Yeah, how so? Like show me like what it might change.
They might try to either arch or they might let the weight spring up forward.
Exactly, yeah. Because sometimes, let's say you started somebody, let's just say a lunge. Let's say you started somebody with a lunge with 1 or 2 dumbbells, let's say just 1 on the side, and you just kept seeing this, no matter how much you coached it. You can literally, saying nothing, you could literally just say, instead of holding the weight at your side, try it holding it here. And that could literally fix it ASAP, because now they can't, well, sometimes they can, right? But they can still do that, but a lot of times if the weight's here, they'll force themselves to stay a little more vertical. Yeah, so totally right. That makes a ton of sense. Let's say Zercher looks good. So I've actually never done a whole lot of Zerchers in my like past training. There are a lot of PT places that are now starting to do them. A lot of people with low back pain, some like will be told to do Zerchers. Just kind of depends on where you learn your background from. Some people will coach them, some won't. Just like really depends on the person. But Zercher is going to be a little tougher because you now can start adding more load, because we're now holding onto a barbell and we're adding weight to it, right?
So they can kind of collapse and their upper back can round a little.
Some people, you'd be surprised. Some people, the thing that I notice the most that happens on a Zercher, and it depends on the person, right? But I notice the most is they typically actually do a decent job of staying like vertical, and back tends to be pretty flat. But a lot of times what I notice is, and it depends on the person, but I'll notice more of hips come up and then upper body. Yeah, and that's the most common one I have seen. I know that varies depending on the type of population you coach and things like that. But that's the most common one I'll see, is like they hold it here and they're maybe lifting too much and their legs try to like shoot out of the bottom, and they don't come up all at once. They'll come up hips and then upper body. Peggy's a good example of this. She'll do that as well. But rounded back, sometimes some people will, but a lot of times I notice they'll just, it's kind of like the goblet. You won't see a lot of rounded back because they're holding something tight, so they kind of have to use their lats, right? And they can't just collapse, otherwise they'll like flop down. Yeah. You know? Zercher would be a good progression, and then let's say you want to progress them again, where would you go next, do you think? They can vary. I mean, there's different ideas too.
Squat, back squat.
Yeah, totally. And what would you do if somebody on a front squat, let's just get the front squat set up. What would you do? So yeah, front squat and back squat. So depending on the person, actually,
How's the purple back feel?
a front squat could be harder than a back squat for some people, and then vice versa. But they're both kind of like top of the progression, right? Would be a.
I know they were saying, actually I think I did read over this document, but not like just like read over it.
Yeah.
Really go super in depth. But I know that she said that they do Zercher, front squat, then back squat. But I think front squat's harder personally.
Yeah, and some people will, and then some people won't. And it kind of.
It's harder or is it for your personal self?
So I know back squat, like typically people can load more, and then front squat is usually a little bit less. My body just feels better front squatting than it does back squatting, but everybody's different. Like I've coached several people who they just naturally look better in it, and they just depending on their limb lengths, they look better front squatting than they look better back squatting. Or some people will get back pain. Some people, not everybody, but will get like low back pain on a back squat, whereas they might not holding it in front. So, okay, let's just use the front squat now, for example. Let's say you had somebody who couldn't get, I'm just gonna show you what a normal front squat people would teach. They couldn't get, my mic's gonna be, it's gonna be crackling over there. They couldn't get here, like their arms couldn't do anything. Do you know what you would do next? Like let's say they could not get, well,
Can they cross their arms?
crossing would be a good one too. Yes, crossing would probably be the first place you start. And you could actually, one of the best ways to teach a front squat, if you're somebody's brand new, and this, I guess this would be a regression of a front squat, and I actually like teaching this probably before, it depends on the person, but especially like a young athletes I do this for, before I'd ever teach them any sort of barbell on their back, even like a Zercher, in my own personal opinion, but I know it just kind of depends on who you work with. I like teaching a zombie squat. Oh, I caught it. I'm trying to make sure this mic doesn't get caught here. It's like a big reach forward. It's kind of tough with the wall here. It's a big reach forward, and the bar sits on shoulders. Have you seen a zombie squat? So yeah, it's just as it looks. So bar will sit right at their neck, okay? Arms will be locked forward.
Do they have to have kind of shoulders to be able to do that though?
It's a good question. You just go lighter bar. If you feel like somebody physically is struggling, like this is a 15-pound bar.
Like if they have really bony shoulders.
A lot of times, and it depends, you know, it depends, right? It's like, what do you, it helps to have muscle more on your shoulders, but sometimes I won't even ask them. I'm just gonna tell them like front squats are uncomfortable. And you know, a lot of times if it's up there, like a lot of times what I'll teach them initially, so hold arms out like this. I'll say, don't let me push your hands down. And that'll be a perfect position, and a lot of times they will feel better shoulder. Doesn't mean it's gonna be perfect, but it also will fix almost the entire front squat. Because if they can be stiff, because a lot of times they get really nervous and they like, I'll show you, they get really nervous and they'll do one of these, like that, right? But if all I coach, because I'll put a box right behind them, I'll put that blue box right behind them, because then I don't have to coach setting hips back, and I don't have to coach depth if that box is there, I say touch the box. And now all I coach is arms stiff. They have to stay vertical, tap butt to box, and then up, okay? Some might complain about shoulders. Super hard, you wanna try it? So I'll put the box here, so you might need a heel elevation too. So arms stay, so you want it should feel like, I tell people this, it should feel like it's like choking you. Yeah, so you want to keep those arms locked. I'm gonna put this box, yeah, right there. And it should feel like if it's a heavy enough bar, it feel like it's choking you. And I tell people, if it feels like it's choking you, you're doing it right.
Yeah, it wants to roll.
Yeah, so then I'll cue like, don't keep those as stiff as you can.
I have to like keep them higher than.
Yeah, so it should literally there.
Okay.
And you want to keep them as stiff as possible. And then some people, right, aren't going to have that mobility.
Yeah.
You know, and that either might mean this just might not be good. We can rack it. That might not be a good exercise for them, or maybe they need a heel elevation.
Yeah.
If they complain about shoulders, me personally, I'll sometimes be like, I just almost will ignore them, and I'll say like, this is uncomfortable. But it depends. If you have somebody who comes to you and maybe they're paying a higher price point, and it's just they don't want to do it, then why give it to them? If they don't want to do it, like, we have a lot of other options that we can do. But if they want to learn a front squat, typically zombie squat's the best way to start because it teaches somebody to be vertical and not collapse. Because that is what almost 90% or more people will do if they've never learned a front squat, is they hear and they'll collapse. This, if you just keep repeating it over and over again, will teach a little bit over time to stay more vertical, and you'll get them to be forced to lift lighter and then have to sit vertical while keeping butt shifting back. Does that make sense a little bit? But we don't see a lot of front squats in here, so that's more if you ever coach a lot of people with front squats too, or like a hang clean. If you ever coach hang cleans in the future, that's one way you start progressing towards a hang clean as well. But we won't ever do hang cleans in here, I don't think. Any questions on any squats? Or if something went wrong, what you might do? Any questions on that stuff? Let's say somebody's knees cave.
I think just the hardest part is getting them to be able to go at that,
like
low enough.
Depth. Yeah. Yes, and that's where like I said, you're not gonna always fix it all in one session. So that's just where you just might simply just go, the blue pad's taken, but you might simply just put a little bit higher box, or we use one of the plyo boxes. And then we just slowly work our way from there. Let's say you're at a place that you can't elevate the box. Just like I told you before, you can, it's gonna be an over exaggeration, but you can take one of the small boxes. You could take a plate, actually. Plate's actually probably a better example. Let's say you aren't in a place, or let's say you were ever in a scenario where you could not raise the box, or you just need a little bit of a tougher variation. You could take like a plate, or I guess there'd probably have to be 2 plates here, so their feet are wide enough. So I'd probably put 2 plates, okay? And then since their feet are higher, that means their butt now has to go lower. Does that make sense? So like if I'm higher,
They might be like, I can't get down.
Yeah. So, but let's say you're ready to progress them. Like let's just say you're ready to progress them, and a pad's too tall, or you don't even have a pad. You might just raise this a teeny bit, because it's the same thing as adding or taking away a small pad. Would be just elevating their feet a little bit, because now they have to go that much lower. That'd be a way to progress. So that's the way I progress it in here, because we don't really have a middle ground for that big, thick blue pad. And sometimes I take the blue pad away and it just doesn't look good anymore. Like it's still too hard. I would then opt for maybe just elevating feet a teeny bit. That's an option you could do.
That would make it harder though.
Yes, but let's say, imagine this is like a thick blue pad. And let's say I'm ready to progress them to a lower. Let's say like this, like I want to get them to a little lower box. You would typically get a thinner pad, right?
Yeah.
But in here, we don't have anything thinner than that blue one. So something I've done and I do is I just take one of these plates and I raise their feet up.
With that pad still on it.
Yes.
Okay, I
correct.
get not. I was like,
yeah, sorry. Yeah, you're not. Yeah, that's way harder.
Taking that away.
No.
And adding a patty.
No. I know. I didn't have the blue one, so it's tougher to show you. Yes. Or you could literally just. This is where it gets. Just depends what you're working with, but you could just do a plate. It just depends if you trust them or not. Yeah. Yeah. It depends if you trust them or not. So that'd be basic, or that's kind of how you progress, regress. I'm trying to think if there's any like weird scenarios that you might run into. Oh yeah. So let's say somebody, get all the tools out. Let's say somebody knees do cave in on the way up. What might you do?
Just tell them to push the ground away with their feet.
Okay.
Or tell them, just show them that what they're doing, and then try to tell them like, hey, this can hurt our knees.
Yeah.
Try to put your knees.
Good. Yeah. Like visually showing them.
Yeah.
Yes. Great place to start. Let's say that doesn't work. What would you do? Because it sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Try to guide their knees or have them use a band.
Yeah, band's a good one. Yeah, totally. Let me see. Thinner ones, just depends on the person, but you can use these ones. It depends if somebody's overweight, you're not gonna wanna use a thin band, right? But you can use like the big Canva. Sometimes there's too much resistance, so you would go for like a thinner band. But something, when it's around their knees, right? Like I'll just do it. If something's pulling my knees in, your body's reaction is to push out. So yes, this is a great way. You can teach it, but you wouldn't want to stay there forever, right? So you would then try to, in the future, once you get rid of the band, during the actual exercise, you're telling them maybe what the band's doing, and you're telling them, maybe in the first set or two, you might not say anything, but then maybe you come back next week, or you tell them, you could tell them in that session, it just depends on the person, but you're telling them what that band's doing. Like you're telling them that it's making sure your knees aren't going over. And you say, do you feel how it's creating tension? Do you feel like how your feet are kind of having to like rip into the ground? Or you use whatever cues you want. Or you can even ask them like, what does that feel like? And they might tell you like, it feels like I use the cue of ripping a piece of paper apart with my feet. Or they just might, there's a million things that people will come up with, because everybody's different. Like I hear some people tell me all these random things. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna steal that cue from you now. But you'll tell them you ask them like, how does that feel? What do you feel? If they don't even know, you teach them what it's doing. So then when you get rid of the band, I want you to do the same thing that you did with the band, but now without it, to where you keep your knees from not kicking in. And then it might take time. Some people might get it like that, and some might not. Sometimes it just depends on the person, and I think you probably see me do it, but sometimes somebody's squatting, I say just push against my hand. Like I'll try to push their knee in, just push against my hand. If it doesn't really work, then I might opt for a band. Usually the best bet, but like you said, the first place I'd go to is showing them, or just telling them, don't let your knees kick in. If that doesn't work, I might now show them, or vice versa. It depends who you work with. Some people do better from physical touch, some people do better from visual. You just try them all. The easy stuff, if that doesn't work, then we might now try a little tool, and then usually the tool will work. Now it's how do we get them to do it without the tool? Maybe it takes a week or two, maybe it takes longer, but we're trying to then now relate that tool to without using it. And that's where some people might miss the mark a little bit, is they just give them a tool, but don't actually teach them what the tool is doing. It's like the box. I will use the same cue sometimes. I'll give them a box. We'll just say they're going to a squat, and I'm trying to get them to sit their butt back. I will say, like you're sitting in a seat, like you're sitting on a toilet, whatever cue you want to use, and maybe it worked for that person. Now in the future, when you take that box away, I still use that same exact cue, and because I want them to sit back, and I'm still telling them why I'm using this box there too, like when I'm using it. So hopefully, in the future when I take it away, they know that feeling of sitting down. Because a lot of times if you don't teach them, and not everybody's this way, but a lot of times if you don't teach them, the moment you take it away, they're now back to not sitting their butt back, Sometimes better cues are a lot of like external cues. So that would be something like, it's something that they can, so an internal cue is gonna be, bend your hips, bend your knee. That's gonna be something that like their body's actually doing. External cue would be like rip the floor apart with your feet, push the ground away, things like that. Those click better with people, unless they're very experienced. If they're a very experienced lifter, and let's say you've been lifting for a long time, right? Yeah, and let's say I come up to your deadlift and I say, Maybe you're just deadlifting heavy and I say, get your back flat. You know how to get your back flat. And so that's an internal cue. Get your back flat, because it's just fixed, like I'm just telling you something about your body that you need to do. But somebody who it's not, it might be, you know, deadlift's a bad example because it could take a lot to get them to get their back flat, but internal cue is gonna work better for someone who is super experienced. External is gonna work better for somebody who's not at all. A lot of times I'll relate it, Debbie who plays tennis, I'm just gonna try to relate some things to tennis because she likes tennis and it relates. Somebody who is a dad, or maybe a brand new dad, and I'm teaching them a single leg RDL, I'm gonna, you know, maybe use the cue, be Superman for your kid. You know, whatever you come up with, right? It's like, be Superman for your kid. Like, you know, they know what Superman looks like. He's here. Superman don't look like this, you know? You can come up with as many things as you want. Like, I come up with a million of them, and some work, some of them don't. You just make them up. Sometimes you ask people too, like, what are you thinking about that's working? And they'll tell you, like, I'm thinking about this. And sometimes they'll be like, I don't know. But sometimes they'll tell you, like, I'm thinking about this, and then you just keep saying it. Who's a good example of that the other day? Oh, so we had somebody the other day, I can't remember who it was now. She tells me what she thinks about, so I just use that cue over and over and over again, because she knows that.
Oh, like she has some random creative thing that she just thinks of?
Yes. Marina, when she does a single leg RDL holding onto the rack, she says it looks like a Barbie doll going like this. So now whenever she does, let's say in the future, she does it without the rack, I'm gonna just keep saying, do it like a Barbie doll. And then she'll just remember that now forever, you know? But I'm going on a tangent, but either way. Anything squat-wise, any things you see wrong that maybe I haven't touched on that you want me to touch on? Like maybe things you see wrong that people are doing and you're like, how do I fix that? What do you do? Covered a lot of them too, so.
Yeah.
And then we can go over deadlift too. Think a second if you want, and I'll show you like a quick progression for deadlifts. We're making Tom clean it up. Okay, so usually the first kind of deadlift you'll start somebody at is just a kettlebell deadlift, okay? Very first thing you usually start somebody at would be kettlebell deadlift. I'm trying to think if there's an exception, but very basic level, usually it's gonna be this. If they are struggling to get low on a kettlebell deadlift.
Yeah, because that is pretty low, especially like.
That is one is, yeah, totally.
Do they start to go like that?
Oh yeah, they'll do a lot of things. Yeah, round back, who knows, really things. How would you make that easier? What do you think?
I would put something like a little box.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, totally. You just bring the floor to them. I'm just gonna use this, but you could use a million different things.
Okay.
Bring the floor to them. And honestly, sometimes it helps them because now their feet have to be hip width, right? But that's gonna be a great way to regress somebody. Let's say they still struggle with it. You just keep raising it up a little bit. There's a point, obviously, where it's like, well, this is just too high. And maybe I need to go in more detail. See you later, Tom. And maybe I need to go into more detail of how to teach a deadlift. Maybe I'm just doing a bad job of teaching it. But let's say this fixes it. Then good, now we work there. But typically, the way I coach it a teeny bit different, I know, than how other coaches in here. I coach it heel bones in line with the horns, so people are forced to sit their butt back. That's how I do it. Some people will teach it right there. You try what works for you. But that's how I teach.
So it would cause them to sit back versus like reach down?
Yeah, so if it's more back towards your heels, you have to sit your butt back farther to get it, okay? Does it work perfect for everybody? No, but you would have, so when they go down, I might even have them, when they go down, tap that box Because otherwise, sometimes that might happen is they go here and either they bend over or they just start, like their heels come up and it just something doesn't look good. For me, I find that reaching back, just like an RDL or just like the single leg deadlifts, reaching back helps them sit into their hips, which helps them keep a flat back and usually gets them in the right spot. That's how I coach kettlebell. Once again, everybody. Yes, so I'll go like heel bones. Yeah, and you want to sit a little bit lower. Yes.
So when they go, okay, I see. But that would be different like when you start. I guess they don't really do like a barbell.
Not too often in here. Yeah, so, but usually you're not progressing somebody to a barbell until they can like crush this.
Yeah.
Do they have to
I
go?
see what you mean, how getting it back.
And do they have to go down to the heel bone? No, I mean, maybe the logo on their shoe. But typically, a very common mistake is shifting forward. Very common mistake on squat, shifting forward, like weight shifts forward. And they have a tough time sitting and using their hips. That's just something I do. Doesn't mean you have to do it that way. But I like to teach heel bones in line with the kettlebell, or if I'm standing over top of it and it's raining outside, kettlebell stays dry. If it's in front of me and it's raining, kettlebell gets wet because I'm not standing over top. So that's what I do. Looks like starting to clean up, so we'll clean up here. So, that would be the very first part on kettlebell. Once you teach a kettlebell deadlift, trap bar is actually, for some people, easier too at times. It's interesting how it works sometimes, but trap bars actually would be maybe a next progression. There's a lot of different ways you can start moving towards. You could teach an RDL. You could teach an RDL. Shortly after, teach a hinge. A hinge pattern can be really tough to teach. Sometimes I've found it's easier to teach the kettlebell deadlifts and then teach a hinge after. You just got to try what works for you at times. But basic hinge, you just lightweight. I can show you ways that you teach it too. Basic hinge pattern, one kettlebell or dumbbell, 10 times better than two. You're holding two, it's a lot harder to get, like when people are here, they use their lats more and they get their back flat. When people are out with two dumbbells, they typically have a tough time getting their back in the right position. Whereas if you grab one dumbbell or kettlebell, people typically do an RDL better with one than they would with two. So that would be that's a really good place to start as well if you're teaching the hinge. I didn't use that when I first started, and then I started doing that. I'm like, oh my God, this makes my job 10 times easier.